Thomas knew he was in trouble the moment he felt the tickle. It started as a whisper of irritation in his left nostril, subtle but sinister, right when the third segment of the intergalactic biology finals began. He blinked hard, pinched his nose, and willed the sneeze into submission. It was no use. One shallow inhale later, he erupted into a sneeze, so forceful it startled the Lumari proctor into shedding her luminescent shell layer. Achoo! His head jerked forward with a wet snap, and blood sprayed across the gleaming black interface of the biometric exam scanner. It wasn't a dramatic gush, but a steady crimson trickle that instantly soaked the hem of his academy uniform sleeve. He groaned. The room fell into a cold silence. For a moment, the only sound was the faint whir of the scanner's recalibration system, now blinking a violent magenta as it processed what it assumed was a chemical interference pattern. A second later, a piercing siren began to wail. "Code Omega," bellowed a disembodied voice. "Unauthorized biological material detected." The exam hall, previously calm and sterile, exploded into a blur of panicked movement. The table legs retracted. Thomas found himself yanked upward by a gravitational column and suspended midair while a transparent field snapped around him. Lumari invigilators flitted in circles, their iridescent forms twitching with alarm. "Human Thomas Garrett of Terra Sector 9, shrieked a Karathi adjudicator as it hovered eye level to him. "You have deployed an illegal ink release protocol. Biological leakage constitutes a Category 9 violation." "What? No," Thomas croaked, head tilted back, one hand cupping his nose. "I sneezed. This is just a nosebleed." "Likely story," hissed the adjudicator, its tendrils tapping violently at a console. "Blood activation of exam interface suggests encoded memory substrate. Cheating through somatic transmission is a breach of 10 planetary accords." "Encoded what? I just have fragile capillaries." Another alien, a bloated syntherite medic, floated closer, scanning him with a spiral wand. Its gelatinous skin turned yellow in confusion. "Subject is exhibiting baseline stress indicators consistent with a mammalian autonomic hemorrhagic response." "In standard," the Karathi snapped. He sneezed too hard and popped a blood vessel in his nose. Thomas sighed heavily, the blood still dripping. "Yeah, it's not some weapon. I wasn't cheating." The scanner under him pulsed, then let out a chilling mechanical chime. "DNA sequence detected. Alert. Pre-coded heuristic patterns embedded. Probabilistic match with exam content at 91.8%. All conversation halted. The Karathi blinked its 3 eyes. "He's genetically rigged," it whispered. Thomas gawked. "What? No, I'm not." The medic floated sideways in alarm. "It seems his DNA carries structured information overlapping heavily with the test database. This isn't natural." Thomas wiped his nose with his sleeve again. "It's just human DNA. We have junk sequences, and a lot of repeating segments, and maybe some evolutionary leftovers from fish. I don't know. I studied. That's why it matches the test." But no one was listening. A metallic collar snapped around his neck with a hydraulic hiss, dimming his vision slightly as a neural suppressant engaged. The biometric table retracted into the floor with a solemn thunk. "Thomas Garrett," announced the lead proctor with a stiff bow, "you are hereby suspended from Galactic Academy pending review for genome-level academic fraud. You will be transported to the Disciplinary Bioethics Tribunal for inquiry." Thomas swore under his breath. As he was escorted out of the room flanked by 2 floating bailiffs and an overly nervous syntherite who kept offering him nasal plugs, he could still hear the hushed voices of other students buzzing behind him. Did the human really hide the answers in his own blood? How do you even study like that? "I heard their lungs are symmetrical. Of course they cheat." He tried to protest again, but the collar emitted a soft hum, and his voice shriveled into a breathy wheeze. By the time he was confined to the Academy's isolation wing, barely more than a medical bay with reinforced ethics filters, he was emotionally exhausted, physically dehydrated, and still mildly drippy. He spent the first 3 hours trying to explain that human bodies sometimes bleed without being asked to. The Lumari nurse stationed outside kept nodding and humming while backing slowly away from the door. She didn't return. Later that evening, a delegation of bioethicists visited, flanked by an android transcriptionist who recorded every blink Thomas made. "Your genome," said the head ethicist, a crustaceous elder from the Axtell Accord, "displays algorithmic organization patterns that exceed permissible entropy levels for a naturally evolved species." "I don't know what that means." "Your genes resemble compressed data storage. There are mnemonic sequences resembling mnemonic triggers embedded near neurofunction markers. We believe your species may be preloading educational content into your gametes." Thomas blinked slowly. "You think we cheat from birth?" "That's the working theory." He laughed, instantly regretting it as a tickle ignited another sneeze. The nurse, who had just returned with a protein drink, screamed and dropped the cup. 3 more bioethicists sprinted in with containment gear. Thomas didn't resist. He just sighed and tilted his head back. "Can someone at least get me a tissue?" 1 week into the investigation, things hadn't improved much. By then, Thomas had undergone 2 genome scans, a cortical activity sweep, and a full blood analysis at a facility normally reserved for Class 3 war criminals. Every time he sneezed, and there were now recorded 8 of them, a room full of panicked scientists dove for cover. The first nosebleed demonstration had been filmed in ultra-high resolution and broadcast to over 12 academic research bodies. The footage, dubbed Red Leak Protocol, sparked galactic debates about the ethical implications of blood-based mnemonic storage. It took Thomas 12 hours of non-stop explanation, a hand-drawn sketch of the human sinus system, and a live demonstration with nothing but dry air and frustration before they agreed to investigate alternate explanations. Even then, the skepticism lingered. "The chromosomal redundancies," muttered one Centauri xenogeneticist, "they read like pre-structured answer keys." Thomas, laying back on a plastic exam table with a cotton pad stuffed in his nose, groaned. "We have 46 chromosomes. Maybe yours are just lazy. Mockery will not help your case." "I'm not mocking. I'm tired. And I want to go back to my dorm before my sinuses implode." The tribunal remained unconvinced. As the final day of deliberation approached, the Academy faced pressure from interstellar media. Human diplomats released official statements clarifying that nosebleeds were not tactical acts of sabotage. A delegation from Earth's Bureau of Intergalactic Education was en route. Thomas, meanwhile, spent most of his time figuring out how to sneeze without alarming the censors. When the tribunal finally convened for the conclusive session, Thomas stood at the podium with gauze in one nostril and a datapad in hand. "I've compiled over 60 years of human medical literature," he began, "all of which confirm nosebleeds are common, especially when you're stressed, or in dry air, or crammed into a bioluminescent exam pod after 12 sleepless nights." The tribunal remained silent. "As for my DNA looking like it has answers in it," Thomas continued, "maybe that's just how humans are. We're messy. We evolve fast. We've got genes for stuff we don't even use anymore. Some of us are born with tails." There was a pause. Then the Axtell elder clicked its data tablet. "After extensive review, we concede that your bodily malfunction may not have been an attempt to breach examination protocols. Pending final analysis, a reclassification of human biogenetic anomaly will be added to the database." Thomas perked up. "Does that mean I'm not expelled?" "You remain under observation. However, disciplinary measures are suspended until further genetic evidence arises." "Can I go back to class?" The elder nodded solemnly. "We will reprogram the scanner with a human quirk override. Your kind will be flagged as biologically dramatic, not maliciously enhanced." Thomas leaned back, relieved. "I'll take it." As he walked out of the tribunal chamber, he passed a display screen that had already been updated with a new advisory banner. "Warning. If subject exhibits nasal hemorrhage, do not initiate code omega. Humans may leak." He laughed. It made him sneeze again. And someone still screamed. Thomas Garrett returned to the general student population with the cautious optimism of someone who'd been wrongly accused, scientifically humiliated, and cleared of charges technically. The halls of the Intergalactic Academy of Xenobiology didn't quite echo with applause at his return, but they did buzz with the sound of restrained curiosity. Everywhere he went, alien students watched him with a mix of admiration, concern, and outright suspicion. Some blinked multiple eyes in tandem. Others took notes. A syntherite even tried to hand him a pen made of saline-resistant plastic, just in case your writing arm starts bleeding too. "Do you guys think I'm made of ketchup packets?" he asked. The syntherite tilted sideways. "Is that not your emergency nutrition storage?" He decided not to answer. Professor Delian, a triune from the gas colonies of Vezra, was the first to formally welcome him back to class. Her three heads spoke alternately, giving every sentence a chaotic rhythm Thomas had only just gotten used to. "Thomas Garrett, you have been somewhat vindicated," her first head said. "Temporarily," added the second. "But reinstated nonetheless," concluded the third. "Thanks," Thomas muttered, rubbing his nose unconsciously. She motioned him to the front of the amphitheater. "Today, you will assist in the lab. An educational opportunity to show us how human physiology functions." That didn't sound ominous at all. The exam table in the center of the room had been freshly sanitized, its surface glowing faintly with sterilizing plasma. Thomas took his place at the demonstration console, avoiding the new human leak containment station someone had installed next to the hand sanitizer. The topic of the day: respiratory biomes. Students from a dozen species watched intently as Thomas loaded a digital scan of the human sinuses into the classroom projector. He was halfway through explaining how mucosal linings worked when a Karathi student raised a segmented appendage. "Are these boogers an intentional feature or an accidental byproduct of evolutionary error?" Thomas began. "They're more of a functional accident. They trap pathogens." There was a murmur of confused respect. Then another hand went up. "If you sneeze again, will it happen?" "What?" "The ink defense. Will it activate?" Thomas groaned. "It's not an ink defense. And no, I'm not going to sneeze just because someone says sneeze." He sneezed. Only a little. There was no blood this time, but half the room still flinched. Professor Delian raised a tentacle toward the sensor array, which had automatically lit up in amber. "See? Amber, not red. We're good," Thomas said quickly, dabbing at his nose with the Academy-issued tissue he now carried in his sleeve like a badge of shame. The class slowly settled, though a Frantar student kept scanning him with what looked suspiciously like a homemade fluid spectrometer. After class, he was cornered by Mac, a Rotary student with far too many elbows and a hobbyist interest in forensic biology. "I've been analyzing your genome," Mac said excitedly, tapping his chest where a portable lab console was embedded. "Did you know your chromosomes appear to have interleaved redundancies? Like overlapping flash drives?" "I have no idea what that means," Thomas replied, carefully avoiding bumping into the metal doorway. "It means you're biologically over-indexed. Your DNA is like a final exam study guide." "Okay, I get that it looks that way, but it's not. I didn't put anything in my genes." "But the structure is optimal for cross-referencing data. In fact, your blood sample practically shouted exam answers when I ran it through my heuristic sorter." "You ran my blood through a sorter?" Mac blinked all six eyes innocently. "It was already public record from the tribunal filings. Don't worry, I anonymized you by naming the sample Sneezy." Thomas groaned. "Mac, can you do me a favor and not make me sound like a walking USB stick?" "But you are. You're like biological Wi-Fi." The rest of the week didn't exactly help. As part of the Academy's reintegration protocol, Thomas was subjected to a variety of educational outreach sessions where he was paraded through departments like a science fair exhibit. In applied xenogenetics, they debated whether humans should be classified as high risk for exam contamination. In multi-species ethics, a heated argument broke out about whether a nosebleed constituted consent to scan DNA. And in the campus cafe, someone served a drink called the Thomas Bleeder cranberry juice and lemon fizz marketed as unexpectedly enlightening. The only person who seemed remotely sane was Vel, a Zarnathi second year with iridescent skin and a sarcasm problem. She found Thomas in the bioinformatics lab on the fourth night, surrounded by 6 empty water bottles and a digital chart of the human genome. "Let me guess. Trying to figure out how not to get flagged next time your sinuses rebel?" He didn't look up. "I just want to prove I didn't cheat. I studied for that exam for 4 months. I didn't encode the answers into my bones." She peeked at his chart. "Is that the section they flagged?" "Yeah. It overlaps with question clusters from segments 2 and 5 of the test." Vel gave a low whistle. Yikes, that does look suspicious. Thomas sank into his chair. Tell me something I don't know. She leaned on the edge of the table, tapping the screen. You know what I think? The system was designed to flag improbability, not intent. You just happen to be so weird you broke the probability curve. Is that your way of saying I'm biologically ridiculous? It's a compliment. Your DNA's just loud. He laughed softly. For once, no sneeze followed. Hey, she added, why not show the board your entire genome? Like a full transparency dump. Let them see it's just naturally messy. They'll think I'm faking it. Then make it interactive. Let them play with the genes. Embed some of your failed quizzes in the junk DNA. Show them your grades weren't that superhuman. Thomas stared at her, realization dawning. You know, that's actually brilliant. Of course it, Island. I'm Zarnathi. We thrive on scandal mitigation. By the following morning, Thomas had assembled a dynamic genome model, fully annotated with his academic history, allergic sensitivities, and a small animated diagram of himself sneezing at a cat. The demonstration was held in the main auditorium, with administrators, ethics officers, and several increasingly disoriented xenogeneticists in attendance. As Thomas walked them through the digital strands of his DNA highlighting bits labeled utterly useless, probably left over from fish, and doubt this helps with biology, he could feel the room begin to shift. Then he tapped the final node. This section, he said, triggered the system alert because it matches the test content, but it turns out it also matches parts of a human cereal box. I didn't cheat. I just shared genetic markers with cartoon mascots and outdated nutrition labels. The room was silent for a long, thoughtful moment. Then a voice at the back said, well, that would explain the redundancy. Another muttered, the sugar pathways that explain so much. The ethics chair adjusted his lenses and stood slowly. Mr. Garrett, we owe you an apology. It appears your genome is not a crime scene. It's just loud, as your peer stated. Thomas exhaled. We will update our scanning systems accordingly. The chair added, a human quirk override will be implemented to prevent future misreadings. Thomas nodded. Thank you. And, as a gesture of good faith, the chair continued, your exam results will be fully restored, with commendation for involuntary bravery. He chuckled. I'll take it. As he walked out, Vel caught up with him. So, free from suspicion, genetically cleared. What now? I'm going to sleep for 16 hours, then maybe sneeze into a pillow, quietly. She grinned. Your reputation may never recover, but hey, at least you didn't cheat. He looked at her. Vel, I had a nosebleed. Exactly. That's what makes it so inspiring. The term human quirk override spread through the Intergalactic Academy faster than an Eridani mold bloom. It popped up in system logs, class registration screens, even vending machine disclaimers. Apparently, it wasn't just the biometric exam scanners. Half the campus infrastructure had been quietly running threat assessment protocols on Thomas's nasal behavior. Someone even attached a permanent warning plaque to the biology lab's main bench. Caution. Blood may contain sarcasm. Thomas tried to return to a routine. He even volunteered as a lab assistant, partly to prove his resilience, and partly to keep tabs on any lingering rumors about genetic exam tampering through mucosal disruption. But the shadow of scandal has a way of trailing you with precision-guided awkwardness. You're the blood guy, right? A wide-eyed Norcal student asked in the cafeteria. No, Thomas replied flatly. I'm the misdiagnosed immune response victim. Same thing, isn't it? Thomas stabbed his meal cube with a little more force than necessary. Back in the xenogenetics wing, researchers had started treating him like a semi-domesticated curiosity. While the tribunal had cleared him, the accidental discovery that human DNA appeared to resemble compressed datasets opened new research avenues no one wanted to leave unexplored. He was strongly encouraged to participate in a new observational program called Homo sapiens, Evolutionary Coincidence, or Biohacker's Dream. It sounded more like a reality show than a scientific study. Thomas sat uncomfortably in the observation chamber, while two Karathi analysts scanned his vitals from behind a fogged privacy pane. I'm just reading a book, he said aloud. Your heart rate increases every page, suggests hidden data triggers. It's a romance novel. I have feelings. Noted. Meanwhile, his nose thankfully had remained untraumatized. Until day 6. It started with a routine environmental stress test. The lab's humidity regulators had malfunctioned during the night, and by the time Thomas arrived for his morning evaluation, the air inside the chamber had the crisp dryness of an overworked desert fan. His first sniff was suspicious. The second, more ominous. "Nope," he said, pinching his nostrils. "Not today. Not again." But fate, as always, ignored his objections. The sneeze came without elegance, a sudden bone-deep convulsion that flung his upper torso forward and scattered the data slate from his hands. And of course, the blood followed. A small dot at first, then 2. Then a mild drizzle across the biometric wristband he'd been wearing as part of the study. Immediately, alarms blared. A fluorescent red sensor pulsed from the ceiling. "Leak event? Human has activated internal ink." Thomas shouted. "No, he hasn't. He's just really unlucky and slightly anemic." A foam containment dome dropped from above and encased him in a sound-muffled dome of embarrassment. He slumped into the bench seat inside, a gauze already shoved in one nostril. By the time Vel arrived, her walk casual, her smirk barely concealed Thomas had made a peace offering to the observing staff, a signed waiver of all future sneeze-related data collection rights. "Another incident?" she asked through the dome speaker. "Does it still count if I'm not even surprised anymore?" Vel shrugged. "At least this time, no one tried to read your blood for answers. They were about to sequence my nasal discharge for hidden protein coding. That's dark." The next day, Professor Delian summoned Thomas to her office. All 3 of her heads seemed unusually synchronized, which was rarely a good sign. "Thomas Garrett," her first head said, "we regret to inform you." "Oh no," Thomas muttered, "that your biological quirk has sparked unintended consequences. Still not great. Involving a competitive cheating ring." He blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Professor Delian rotated a screen toward him. It displayed footage from a back alley section of the Academy's lesser-monitored study zones. A group of students, several species, were engaged in a clandestine transaction. "They're buying my genome?" Vel, standing beside him, squinted at the footage. "Wait, is that a counterfeit blood pack with your chromosomal markers?" "Why would anyone sell my DNA?" Thomas asked, genuinely baffled. "To simulate high exam probability," Delian's second head answered. "Students believe your DNA naturally matches test content. They're injecting diluted samples hoping to trigger genetic affinity scanning. But the system has a human quirk override now. That's not even how this works." "Students are often misinformed," her third head sighed, "particularly under academic stress." "Someone bootlegged my sneezes?" Vel looked mildly impressed. "You've become the black market equivalent of a study guide." Thomas sat down heavily. "Am I liable?" "No," Delian replied. "But we need your help." He looked up. "Doing what? Bleeding in more creative ways?" "We want you to serve as the keynote speaker at the Ethics Symposium next week. Topic: Biological Misinterpretation in Multi-Species Institutions." Thomas blinked. "I'm going to give a lecture about my nose?" Delian's heads nodded, almost in unison, with visual aids. The auditorium was packed. Students, professors, even off-world journalists filled the tiers. A holographic banner floated over the stage. "Understanding Human Biophysiology, When Your Face Leaks by Accident." Thomas stood in front of the crowd, a pointer in one hand and a facial tissue in the other. "So, let's start with the basics," he began. "Humans have sinuses. They're useful until they betray you in the middle of important exams." Laughter echoed through the room. He clicked the first slide. An animation showed the human sinus system in vibrant color, with small flashing leak risk indicators. "We're a species of blood in chaos," he said, "but we don't weaponize it, at least not intentionally." More laughter. He moved through the presentation, alternating between factual medical data and mildly humiliating personal anecdotes. He concluded with a side-by-side comparison, one image of human DNA and another of a syntherite data crystal. "Turns out looking like you're cheating doesn't mean you are cheating. It just means the universe has a twisted sense of humor when it designed your genome." The audience applauded. After the symposium, Thomas was approached by half a dozen students, all of whom seemed genuinely interested in human biology now, rather than suspicious of covert ink releasing organs. Mac popped up beside him. "Your nasal pressure variability graph was the most downloaded slide of the entire presentation. Please tell me they learned something useful from it." "Absolutely. Some are now studying Earth nasal mechanics as a defense against atmospheric destabilization. You've created an entirely new field of nose-based survival theory." "That wasn't the goal," Thomas muttered. Vel joined them, arms crossed. "Well, your nose made history, and you didn't even have to cheat." He grinned. "I think I finally recovered from the last sneeze." At that exact moment, a faint tickle began in his left nostril. He froze. Mock backed away slowly. Vel raised both hands. "Not again," Thomas whispered, tilting his head and desperately sniffing. The sneeze faded. He exhaled, triumphant. Crisis averted. Vel patted his shoulder. "That's the most progress I've seen all year." By the third week post-symposium, the Intergalactic Academy had all but canonized Thomas's sinuses. Every digital kiosk now featured a calming message any time a scanner detected unexpected biological input. "Human detected. Possible nasal disruption in progress. No threat level." Someone even installed a sneeze counter outside the xenogenetics wing half-joke, half-statistical tracker. It stood at 9, with a small bronze plaque underneath reading, "Threshold of panic, 3. Current panic level, 0. Thomas should have felt vindicated. Instead, he felt constantly on the verge of awkward fame-induced combustion. Everyone knew him now. Not for being top of his class. Not for the hours he'd poured into flashcards and protein cycle memorization. Number. He was famous because his capillaries couldn't handle low humidity. He turned down 3 podcast requests, a lecture tour through the Helian moons, and one very suspicious offer to appear in a health campaign titled "Know Your Face Fluids." "I just want to finish finals without bleeding," he told Vel one afternoon in the study courtyard. She tossed him a rehydration sachet. "Drink more water, eat more salt, sneeze less. That's how fame works." He squinted at the sachet. "This tastes like banana glue. It boosts vascular stability, also works on plants." Charming. Despite the chaos, the school had changed for the better. The human quirk override didn't just fix Thomas's problem. It triggered a wave of updates across the entire academy system. Biological scanning systems were revised to account for species-specific anomalies. Risk assessments became more contextual, less reactionary. The ethics committee issued a formal apology not just to Thomas, but to humanity in general for misclassifying physiological quirks as malice. It was delivered in a 6-page letter, and accompanied by a 3D printed tissue box shaped like a human nose. The thing sneezed every time you pulled out a tissue. "Who designed this?" Thomas had asked. Vel smiled. "I might have submitted it anonymously." He kept it anyway. On the final day of the semester, he sat once again at a biometric exam pod, ready to retake the portion of the intergalactic biology finals his nose had so dramatically interrupted. This time, no collar snapped around his neck. No hover bailiffs hovered menacingly. The scanner just blinked once, chirped, "Human quirk mode active," and gently vibrated beneath his fingertips. Thomas cracked his knuckles and started the exam. No sneezes. No blood. Just answers. He walked out of the testing wing without a siren, a restraint field, or anyone diving behind a blast shield. It felt oddly anticlimactic. Later that evening, he stood at the main overlook deck, a bowl of lukewarm study noodles in hand. Vel joined him with her own snack, a container of hyper-spiced crystallized algae that smelled like tactical pain. "So?" she asked between bites. "How'd the test go?" "I think I aced it. The questions were tough, but my answers weren't hiding in my chromosomes this time." Vel gave him a rare nod of approval. "Proud of you, Sneeze King. Please don't let that name stick." No promises. They stood in companionable silence, watching shuttlecraft rise from the docks like silver seeds carried upward on thermals. The stars above twinkled like data points waiting to be catalogued. I still can't believe they thought I was a walking answer key, Thomas muttered. Honestly, your genome does look suspicious. If I hadn't met you before the incident, I might have assumed the same. Thanks, Vel. That's so comforting. She grinned. I'm just saying, you made the best of it. You turned one of the galaxy's worst misunderstandings into systemic reform. That's kind of heroic. I blew a blood vessel. Yeah, and somehow got a whole campus to rewrite its scanning protocols. You're a walking policy update. He laughed, feeling the tension of the past few weeks finally unwind. You know what's weird? I'm actually glad it happened. Vel raised a brow ridge. You're saying you're glad your circulatory system betrayed you in the middle of a final? I'm saying sometimes the best changes happen because something goes horribly wrong. This place is better now. Safer, smarter, more understanding, more sneeze tolerant. Exactly. They watched as another transport ship lifted off, its contrail curling into the violet dusk of the upper atmosphere. Vel elbowed him. So what's next? You going to study sinus physiology full-time? Thomas shook his head. Nah. Thinking I'll switch tracks. Maybe something quieter, like xenobotany. I hear plants don't panic when you exhale too hard. Unless they're from Othal Sector 7, those shriek when you sneeze. He groaned. Of course they do. The academy moved on. Students returned to their studies. Protocols adapted. The infamous nosebleed incident faded from headlines and research journals, reduced to a cautionary tale about the dangers of jumping to conclusions and the anatomical mysteries of species still not fully understood. But on Earth, Thomas's mother proudly kept a framed screenshot of the ethics board's apology. It hung in their living room beside his middle school science fair ribbon. And every so often, when he walked the halls of the academy, someone would nod at him, holding up a tissue box like a salute. Thomas would smile back, sometimes wave, always a little embarrassed, but never ever without a pocket full of tissues. Just in case.